500 years ago, a young man ascended the English throne who was handsome, intelligent, gallant and really fit. Qualities which many people thought made him the very embodiment of Arthurian chivalry and sporting prowess. That man was one of our greatest kings, Henry VIII. Henry inherited Greenwich Palace in London from his father in 1509. He developed it as somewhere he could indulge his passion for jousting and all the courtly display that accompanied it. Somewhere around here was his armoury that produced the king's own suits of armour, and just over the road there was his spectacular jousting yard, where he staged and starred in his very own royal tournaments. All trace of those buildings has long since disappeared, but we're here to rediscover them. And we've got just 3 days to do it. The buildings you can see today reflect the grand maritime history of Greenwich. Yet 500 years ago, a spectacular Tudor palace stood in their place. It was called Placentia, Place of Pleasure. And it was here that Henry chose to build his premier Tiltyard to host his jousts and found his royal armoury. Yet amazingly, no one has ever fully excavated these sites, and there are no exact records of what the buildings looked like or even where they stood. But that's set to change, because Time Team's been given the unique opportunity of investigating both these sites. At the Armory, that process has already begun. Well, midsummer and it's still typical Time Team weather. Have we got any idea where this armoury actually is?
Well, within the complex of Greenwich Palace, we know it's this side of a friary building, which is roughly underneath that. We know it's to the east of a stable block, which is over there. We know it's to the east of a Tudor tavern over in that corner. So yes, we're looking somewhere in this corner. Precisely where, we don't know.
John, can geophysics help?
Not really. We've done some work already and it's just too complicated. We need more time.
Maps, Stuart.
We have no maps of this period, so I can't help you there.
Mick, help.
Well, I think we're back to first principles. We've just got to dig a trench and see what's there. And presumably somewhere in this area, but perhaps Julian will give us a sort of target.
I think the only clue we have is a drawing of 1558, which shows a lot of buildings in this area. And there's one in the corner over there, aligned to some of the Tudor roadways, that is a good candidate for being the armoury. Can't prove it, but it's a good candidate.
We better get cracking on it, haven't we?
As so little's known about Henry's royal armoury, just finding it's going to be a huge challenge. And even if we're successful in pinpointing the right place to dig, getting down to the Tudor level of archaeology could be difficult. Julian, who's been searching for the armoury for years, has warned us that any remains of it may be as much as 6 feet down. So the team wastes no time in getting the first trench marked up and the machines in. With only limited evidence to hand to help locate the armoury, we're going to be relying on historical documents, the most informative of which are 2 views of Greenwich drawn in 1558 by the Flemish artist Anthony van den Wingard.
Jonathan, the 2 targets we're after, 1 the Tiltyard and 2 the Armory. Are there any clues on this Wingard drawing which give us any idea where they might be?
The Tiltyard, to start off with, is fairly simple to identify. There are the 2 towers, they're like mock castles, which look down onto the Tiltyard, and there you can see the barrier and 2 fences, so that once you've begun your run, you can't just chicken out and run off the other direction. Now, these are built in 1514 to 18, and associated with the building account we've got that mentions that is the armoury.
What sort of things should we be looking for, and what does an armoury look like at this period?
Well, if you think about the way that people would come up the Thames here, the first sight they get of London is on this pleasant south bank. It's called Placentia, and here's the park going up to the hill, the royal apartments, the chapel facing east. where are you going to place industry? Well, you can either obscure that great vision by putting it over here, or you can place it over the west, just here, toward London. The thing is that we know in 1543 the armoury goes into this dissolved friar's church.
Right.
One starter might be the fact you've got groups of chimneys in this building onto the river and a jetty there. Maybe that's something to do with the delivery of material and working. So it could be that you'd find that that's associated with some manufacturing process.
Have many Tudor armories been excavated before?
None. This is what makes this particular site unique, if we find it.
How will we know when we found it?
Well, we'll be able to identify a Tudor structure, but what happens inside, I think we have to ask the armoury experts.
Chris, what are we looking for? Is it going to be one room or a suite of buildings or what?
Certainly, we know there were several rooms being used for various purposes, some of them just for storage and some for workshops.
We're not going to find a suit of armour.
No, they were all either removed to palaces before or during the Civil War or removed afterwards.
Is there any chance that we could find something that we could associate with Henry VIII?
It's possible. Small pieces like buckles or hinges which may have fallen through the floor could have found their way into the debris layer.
We've still got a lot of digging to do before we even get close to any archaeology connected with the armoury. On the other side of the road, on the lawns of the National Maritime Museum, the other half of the team is busy opening their first trench. So somewhere around here was the tilting yard, where Henry VIII and his courtiers would have donned their armour, mounted their horses and taken part in all their elaborate tournaments. But Jonathan, a yard by definition is just a big square place, isn't it? We're not going to find anything here, are we?
Well, it's not just a yard. This is the major centre of early Tudor court ceremonial. I mean, the most astonishing things happened here. In the middle of the Tiltyard itself, you'll just find a barrier, and either side of it, knights would charge at each other for the honour of ladies in mock castles. Added to them were the banqueting house, and this is where everyone sat to eat, as it suggests. The disguising house, where they disguised and had masks and balls and so on. We're just trying to pick up the end of that range here, then we can calculate how far down these major features are.
Excuse me, Jonathan, you've drawn this wonderful elaborate drawing and you've now told me that the trench is up here somewhere.
Well, it is. You've got to have a starting point, then we can try and calculate where they all are by comparison.
But then we'll dig in here, will we?
Yep.
So, Sophie, have we got the southern edge of the range yet?
We're starting to pick up something. You can see this sort of crushed brick and mortar here, and it looks like demolition material that's probably come from that line of wall there.
Jonathan, do you reckon this is Tudor?
Well, first impression says that it probably isn't. The mortar looks a bit grey and dirty, not as pure as Tudor mortar, but it is only a first impression. But I'd say it's 17th century.
I think you've got to keep digging, Sophie.
Right, OK.
I've always thought of Henry as this rather fat, grouchy, middle-aged man. It's a bit difficult to think of him doing jousts.
I think that's true, but as a younger man, he was noted across Europe as being one of the most athletic of the crowned heads of Europe. He was born here in 1491 and obviously therefore retained a natural affection for Greenwich. By the time he becomes king, 1509, he's an active sportsman on the field. He enjoys hunting and the chase. He particularly enjoys the Tiltyard. And so this is for him a way of showing off his prowess, both to his own nobility, but also more importantly as demonstration of England's power and might and authority over other countries as well.
Do we know much about the jousts that were held here?
There's a very famous joust that takes place here in 1527, when Henry's determined to win the respect of and also the alliance of the King of France. And so he brings the French ambassadors to London. they're entertained here, and then this extraordinary spectacle of this joust is put on for which we know new buildings are built and a great deal of decoration occurs.
So is that when the buildings underneath the grass were built?
Yeah, the Tiltyard towers had been here for about 10 years by this time. Now, this major occasion in 1527 meant that extra accommodation was provided, particularly for banquets and for masques and dances. So we have a series of two great halls that are linked by a long gallery between them. And in the first one, we have a triumphal arch of a screen behind the king when dining. And that's painted by Hans Holbein as his first major commission in England. The best artisans from Europe were brought in to create this structure for this occasion.
It would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if we could find some evidence of this jousting?
It would indeed, and I'd actually be surprised if there weren't some evidence, because these buildings were smashed down and the site has hardly been touched since. So we should be in luck, I think.
After 3 hours of hard digging, it looks like Phil has found something at the Armory.
Mick, come and have a look at this.
Oh, that's good, isn't
And
it?
never
Look at
mind that curving wall. Look at this big domed thing I got here. Look, it's running right the way back along there.
I know what that could be. There's a big cesspit on a map of 1738 that's got a load of big loos on it.
Oh, and I just found one
I
of
think
them.
you've probably got the brick vault over the top.
But I mean, if it's as big as this and it's dipping away like this, just think what the damage that might have done to the armoury.
Yeah. It's not good, is it? We've got to get a lot of that out, haven't we, really?
Oh,
Yeah.
Morris and I are on the job.
Right, OK.
OK, Morris.
So even if we're successful in locating the Armory, we now have to face up to the fact that any archaeology connected to it may have been dug away. But luckily at the Tiltyard, we've got a lot more to work with. Our main historical source for revels and tournaments at Henry's court was written by Edward Hall. His chronicles helpfully tell us some of the measurements for the Tiltyard buildings. Assuming that they'll find the boundary in Trench 1, Jonathan's now confident he can measure out where the main buildings of the Tiltyard are, based on calculations derived from Hall's description.
Yep, 250 is about here. So somewhere about here, there should be one of the Tiltyard turrets, the banqueting house over here, the Tiltyard stretching beyond us there. This is where I reckon the action is.
How big would this tower have been?
It's somewhere, probably about 25 feet in diameter, maybe 30 foot.
John?
Yeah.
You reckon somewhere around here is the big tower?
Look at the geophysics. Fantastic results. I mean, this looks like a huge building. I mean, I reckon that could be the tower.
It's not quite the form I expected, because Wingard at least shows the top part's octagonal, but it could be
But
built
it definitely suggests to me buildings here.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, I
good
think we
news.
need to investigate those.
So put a trench in?
There's one problem.
What?
Well, I've been told there may be an air raid shelter here. Now, it's just possible that this is air raid shelter and not tower.
Is it hearsay, or are they sort of properly...
I don't know. I think the only thing is we've got to dig to find out. That's the answer.
So on the basis of the geophys, another trench is put in. Over at the Armory, Phil's finding that the more he digs, the more disused drains he exposes. Only a small section of pre-18th century wall is stopping him shutting down the trench and taking the search elsewhere.
Stuart, we've got a bit of early wall showing up.
Oh, nice.
Which is nice. How are you getting on?
Pretty well at the moment, Mick. I've had to go through tons of material, as you can see here, to try and work out where this armoury might be. To summarise it, we've actually only got one source.
Really?
Well, just one. Lots of stuff published later on.
Yeah.
Now, this one source is taken from the expenses, State Papers Expenses of Henry VIII.
Yeah.
And it actually says the fitting shops for the Almain work, the armoury, were erected about 1514 westward of the palace, near the Friars' Church and adjoining the Friars' Road. We know the palace is located in this area and the Friary Church is here, and that this road was Friars' Road. So that means that we're in roughly the right area in this area in here. The other things that are mentioned are accounts for bringing the source material up by river to a landing stage here.
Right.
So they're going. The site itself needs to have kind of wharfage, be near the landing stage.
Right.
What that leads me to suggest to you is that if we're looking for remains of the armoury, we need to be looking perhaps more down towards the river. Down here.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, interestingly, on the later maps, there's been much less development there, so you're likely to
Right.
not get so confused.
On Stuart's advice, Geophys starts surveying the river end of the armoury site to see if his theory might produce the goods. At the Tiltyard, we've already made our mark on the landscape with 2 substantial trenches. The elegant lawn isn't looking quite as pristine as it was this morning. We haven't got much so far in this part of the trench, but here in this rubber trench we got our first sniff of what could well be a Tudor wall. And here there are inklings of the floor of the jousting yard. But this stuff is good, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Tudor green pottery, the sort of thing that they'd have served the food up from the kitchen.
Not only have we got the pottery, we've got Tudor window glass as well, so we've got evidence of the building. But the most interesting find is this piece here, a nice personal piece, a Tudor buckle. And not only can we say that it's definitely Tudor from the shape of it, but we know where it would have been worn. It would have been used as a knee buckle here by man.
But the most exciting news of all is that over there by the digger, we haven't got a World War II air raid shelter after all. We've got something else. Could it be one of the big towers in which the Tudor lords and ladies watched Henry VIII's tournaments? Beginning of day 2 here at Greenwich. Over on the far side of the road where we're looking for Henry VIII's jousting yard, we think we may have got it. And today we're hoping to get the big towers where the audiences would have sat when they were watching the tournaments. But over here where we're looking for Henry VIII's armoury, it's proving pretty elusive. Yesterday we dug that great big trench there.
Yeah.
We started getting excited. But where's the armoury?
Well, we may have a bit of it in there. We've got an early wall and some early deposits, but since then we've been looking at the maps again, having a think, and we think it may be more down here towards the river.
Yeah, there's a whole series of maps here which show layouts of buildings in this area, which might be part of the armoury. It might actually stretch from up there all the way down here, but the importance of coming down here is that there were more yards down here than buildings, and therefore the preservation might be better and not so much destruction, so the Tudor bits might survive here.
Any clues in the geophys, John?
Well, we've surveyed half the lawn. Look, we've got these sort of wall-like responses here. So we're going to look at those.
Yeah, so basically we've dropped a trench in on those 2, one there and one over there, you know, to see what we hit.
But it's looking promising.
Well, we've got an awful lot of late 17th and 18th century brickwork, culverts and structures in this one, although we do appear to have bits of the original ground surface, but that one needs a lot more work on it yet. So, but we're hopeful.
Not surprisingly, Phil, who's moved from a cesspit in Trench 1 to a bunch of drains in Trench 2, doesn't share Mick's optimistic outlook.
How you getting on, Phil?
Well, there's plenty of archaeology here, but I'm afraid I don't think much of it is Tudor. On this side, the whole of the trench going right the way through there has been cut away by this drain. Not only that, we appear to have another drain in here. There's a big gap, big enough to get my fingers in. It looks like the only possible area where we might have a bit of stratigraphy that might relate to the armoury is in that small area at that end.
Well, I'm still optimistic, Phil. I mean, you've still got some potential in there.
But I mean, look, we spent all day yesterday up there, and how much of an area did we get? Little tiny bit at the end.
Yeah.
We've put in another trench here, and we come straight down onto drains and bricks. Now this isn't just our bad luck. I think this area has been well and truly turned over.
I'm still optimistic. I'm not going to give up. Get back down your drain.
You ain't got to dig them, have you?
Over at the Tiltyard, where geophys think we might find the towers, things are looking a bit more positive.
Well, that's much better. It looks like a much more clearly a Tudor wall to me. And, you know, it's early stages, but it's got all the right signs, I think.
Well, this is where we are.
Yep.
We've extended the trench 5 metres in this direction, so we're now well into this blob. We've got this wall. Does that mean that we have the tower?
I reckon this means we've got a Tudor structure, and in this position, it can only really be the tower or an associated structure because we have the banqueting house along an alley between the palace and the first trench we dug, and the tower attached to it. So all in all, we've got combined buildings of about 60-foot width. It's the right area, I think. It's the right distance that we've measured out. I just don't know with this 4 or 5 feet which part of the buildings we're in yet.
Right. We've had some nice finds as well.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is they're Tudor.
What's that one?
This is that Tudor green pottery that we found elsewhere as well. So good dating evidence there. And this piece looks like a piece of tile.
We see lots of this up at Hampton Court. Perfectly right, isn't it, for the period? Now, under the gallery that came from the banqueting house, you'd expect kitchens, you'd expect supplies of crockery for the dining above. So if you find lots more of this kind of stuff, maybe cooking vessels that have been smashed and dumped, that could tell us a lot, couldn't it?
It could, yeah. It ties in very well.
Good. Excellent progress.
So at long last, it looks like we could be on top of one of the Tiltyard buildings. But which? The towers or the banqueting hall?
Well, look, we've got the geophysics results on the old plan now. Originally, we thought this was a tower in here, but we're more inclined to think that the tower is probably in this area, and we may be looking at a banqueting hall in this area.
Well, that's right. We've certainly hit on Tudor material. We've got Tudor pottery associated with it. So the fact that the ground looks relatively undisturbed has got lots of promise. Most of the rubble seems to be in that direction, or maybe even walls in situ. We're not going to know until we continue the trench in that direction.
Yeah, I think we've got to put a lot more effort into this area now. My suggestion is to bring fill in, you know, to really get it going.
Excellent idea. So based on the new geophys, Trench 2's extended to establish whether we've got the banqueting hall, and a third trench is opened over what we hope are the towers. 500 years ago, this field would have rung to the sound of armour being made, but the archaeologists tell me there isn't much chance of finding any significant pieces under the ground. It doesn't matter though, because Time Team have brought in our own very highly skilled armourer who's going to knock something up for me. Right, what are you going to make me?
Hi, I'm going to make you a Tudor breastplate. I'm going to start with a flat sheet of steel, and through a process of cold hammering, I'm going to turn it to the final fitted form. But because steel doesn't bend like cloth does, it has to be absolutely precisely measured. So I need you to give me your best manly form, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
Was all armour made to measure?
No, not all of it. Some of it, in fact, was called munitions armour. That was made for common soldiers and
so it's a bit like today. You could either have it tailored or off the peg.
It's exactly the same, yeah.
How much would it have cost?
About the same as a car today. You know, if you could afford a BMW, you had a BMW suit of armour. If you drove a Mini or a 2CV, well, you were out of luck, really, weren't you?
So this was a major investment?
It was a huge investment. Usually 1 or 2 armours in a lifetime.
With my measurements duly noted down, Master M starts the process of marking and cutting out a template, just as Henry's armourers would have done for him. Yesterday, I was told we might have found the surface of the Tiltyard in Trench 1, but on closer inspection, it appears that we've got something quite different.
Jonathan, this trench down here doesn't seem to have in it what I expected. It's got a lot of walls in it.
Oh, it does, yeah. If you look at Wingard's view, we've got the whole area in red there is the lawn in front of us.
Ah, yes, yeah.
You see a group of buildings just in the foreground.
Oh, right.
And the Tiltyard is to the back and to the right of it. If where we're digging is on the site of these buildings and possibly an associated yard, then we will be looking at the surfaces of the yard and possibly outbuildings having developed from that in the Elizabethan, early Jacobean period.
So that's some time after Henry, but it would make sense, wouldn't it, that those walls are to do with those buildings there. So if the Tiltyard isn't there, where is it down there?
It's about 4 feet the other side of the trench.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Luckily, this miscalculation is so small, it doesn't affect Jonathan's earlier measurement from Trench 1 to the main area of the Tiltyard. We'd hoped that the 2 corners of preserved archaeology in Trenches 1 and 2 might have turned up some walls connected to Henry's armoury. But they haven't. Not defeated, we decide to try a change of tack.
It's like a good game day, no? What are you
It's
doing?
great. I'm hunting for the ghost of the blacksmith that was. Mark has been metal detecting and looking. He's turned up the sensitivity really high, so the things that he would normally ignore, the noise, background noise, I've asked him to look for. And he's finding little hot spots in the soil, laying it out, and I'm going through it with a magnet.
Right.
And what I'm looking for is the residues of blacksmith working. So as they hammer, the sparks fly. The iron sort of scales, it's called hammer scale, and it forms little platelets which are magnetic. And then presumably they get swept up and cleaned out every now and then, and it's made its way into the soil. So we know we're in the area of a blacksmith working, but not in their workshop, because I should have a big bucket full if we were really in the workshop.
Do we need to keep going down,
I think maybe perhaps if we get a little closer to where he was working.
It never ceases to amaze me how we can tell so much from such seemingly insignificant finds. After spending a day and a half excavating 18th century drains, Phil's moved up to the Tiltyard site and has finally got his hands on some much more relevant archaeology.
I like that stump of wall there, Phil.
This one?
Yeah, I'm quite excited by that one, if you can imagine. You see, it's got all the diagnostic features of a Tudor wall. The bricks are about the right size, they're fairly shallow.
Right.
But what really gives it away is the mortar course, because it's what's called double struck. They take the trowel that way, 45 degrees, strike it while the mortar's wet, underside 45 degrees the other way, and that leaves a crisp line in the middle of the course, and it casts a shadow, picking out every brick. That really falls out of favour in the early 17th century, so you can say that's a good Tudor wall.
But I mean, all these bits here, they're the ones I've been getting the demolition.
Well, yeah, there's quite a lot of nice stuff in here, actually. There's that, for example.
This piece of window glass.
There's no curve on it, so it looks like window glass. It's possibly a painted window.
You've seen, haven't you, that bit of floor tile?
Yeah, this one's a nice one. It's quite a high-quality floor tile. All these are bits of a Tudor building. They're not necessarily in the right order, but they're all bits.
The amount of stuff that we're getting, and it'd be just nice to think, particularly with those floor tiles, that maybe we've got some of the floor that Henry VIII himself walked on.
Well, I mean, this is the palace he loved most, so he would have been walking in this area.
But this is only one fragment of wall, and we still don't really know what building it's part of. To confirm Jonathan's earlier hunch that we might be looking at the banqueting hall, we need to find associated walls or structures, so there's still a lot of digging to be done. Now that Master M's cut the template, the next stage is to shape and strengthen it by hollowing it out. And although in Tudor times this would only have been done by a skilled armourer, today I'm going to give it a try.
We're going to use the hollow in the log, and you're actually going to force the metal into the hollow with the hammer. So I want a line there.
Okay.
I'll help you hold it. No, you've got to actually hammer it.
A bit more welly.
Well, you're tickling it. That's a little better. You're sort of getting there, but now it's got to be in a line.
Show me.
Okay. Let's put the earmuffs on.
I think I'll let you get on with it for a bit, all right?
Okay.
Although we've got a good idea what Henry's armour looks like, unfortunately no depictions of the Greenwich jousts survive. But we do have illustrations from a similar tournament.
This is a Westminster joust from 1511, but it's exactly the sort of thing that would have gone on here.
Right.
In fact, here becomes much more permanent. This is a temporary booth. But here's Henry on his horse.
Yeah.
Because the Tiltyard wall's so high, there's his opponent.
Oh, yes.
So he's aimed at the head, and his
Yes.
lance is shattered. So this is a hit for the king.
Good Lord.
It's intended as pageant.
Yes.
It's a way of showing off. It's about impressing both the nobility here. It's certainly intending to impress foreigners.
Oh.
Now, all that rich decoration, a lot of that stuff would have been kept here in Greenwich when the Tiltyard was built. Those two towers down below will have had space for changing rooms. They would have actually kept this material.
That's fantastic, isn't it? I didn't realise anything like that survived.
I mean, look, we can just see, we're looking down the whole length of the Tiltyard here.
Yeah.
You can imagine if that was decorated on both sides with those kind of figures, that kind of decoration, the kind of thing we're talking about. And that was happening here in Greenwich.
The end of day 2, and despite opening 3 big trenches right across the target area, we're still no closer to locating Henry VIII's armoury. But thanks to a small pile of hammer scale, we do now know we're at least digging in roughly the right place. We've had a number of Tudor finds at the Tiltyard, although our ambition to identify and map out the Tiltyard structures rests on just one small piece of Tudor brickwork in Trench 2. But we're sure that this wall must be part of the Tiltyard complex, and we're determined to find more. So tomorrow we're going to pick ourselves up and hopefully ride to a victory Henry VIII himself would have been proud of. Beginning of day 3 of our search for Henry VIII's tilting yard. Yesterday, after 2 solid days' work, all we got was 4 measly courses of Tudor brick. But now you think we might have much more.
I think we've got much, much more, Tony. I think we've got the basis of a major building.
Show me.
Well, you remember yesterday we had this big block of masonry here, and it turns a corner there. We've got the foundation trench, and the wall's actually been robbed out. So after you'd gone, I couldn't rest last night, and late last night we opened up another trench. Now, if you follow the line of this robbed trench,
yeah,
come straight over here. Look, a wall.
Can I come in?
Absolutely, yeah, look at this. It's right on the line of Phil's robbed out trench that once met the corner of his wall. We've got this, and it's absolutely right. Same kind of mortar, nice and creamy bits of gold in it. And there's nothing wrong with that as being a good Tudor wall.
So if this wall is the same as that over there, we've got a really substantial building.
We have, and we've got a nice corner as well we can start to plot on the site.
What do you think the building might be?
Well, I think it could be one side of either the gallery or the banqueting house on here that had the Tiltyard towers attached to it.
But that's the problem. We don't actually know which side it is. I mean, it could be facing directly onto the Tiltyard, or it could be actually at the back of the Tiltyard. We really don't know.
How do we solve it?
Well, the crucial thing is to actually find the edge of the Tiltyard. And Julian's actually putting in a trench over there to try and resolve that.
So once we've got the location of the Tiltyard, we'll know which way this building faces.
Everything else will drop into place.
I'll go and find out from him. Keep working.
OK.
Julian, what are we doing with this trench then?
We're hoping to pick up a Tudor wall on this line that we found 10 years ago.
Another Tudor wall?
It's another Tudor wall, and I think it's the front side of the building range, and I think the Tudor wall you've had over there is the back side of it. So that over here, we should get the Tiltyard itself.
If we find the Tiltyard, what'll it look like?
It should be a hard, packed gravel surface with sand on top of it. And that's where the horses went up and down. That's the business end.
But if we do get the evidence that we're looking for here, then we'll be well on the way to getting a full picture of our Tiltyard.
We should be much closer to the dimensions of the entire Tiltyard.
Excellent. Yesterday, it felt like we were a long way from this point. Yet now, just 2 hours into day 3, things are looking very different. With a total of 5 trenches open, we've got Tudor walls in 2 and 4, demolition rubble in 3, and grand hopes for Trench 5. It can only be a matter of time before we can begin to map out Henry's great Tiltyard. And there's good news down by the river, where it looks like we might finally have found something bigger than Dana's hammer scale that could be connected with the armoury.
This looks as if this wall might be early down the bottom, David.
I do think it is, actually. I think if you sort of like look at the alignment, it seems to be on the alignment of the old course of the River Thames. Is that right, Stuart?
That's right. It is. This is bang on what we were looking for. The wall we're standing on is perfectly parallel to the palace and all these buildings behind. That goes with this lot. But this angle, Dave's right, it's different. And that fits exactly with what we should be looking for. This is, in fact, the most exciting thing we've seen so far.
Yes.
It's great.
So have we got any dating evidence for this wall?
Well, I think if we look at the wall itself, if you study the bricks and the mortar, that would suggest that it's not as early as Tudor, but perhaps it is the Stuart period.
Oh, really?
And also then we've actually got some small finds. There's a piece of pipe, which is 17th century, I think.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
But even more encouraging, and this is what encourages me the most, is that we're starting to come up with very distinctive Tudor finds.
Wow.
Beautiful
That's
Tudor
nice,
greenware, isn't it?
Look at that, yeah.
This is a fragment of a puzzle jug. The puzzle being how to drink from it without covering yourself in beer. What it's doing here is difficult to say. Maybe a drunken armourer decided to keep it as a trophy after a night at the local tavern.
Now, if we've got this sort of datable material down there, it's our best chance at the moment to see anything going back to the Tudor period in the armoury, isn't it?
It's dead exciting at the moment, yeah.
OK.
It's just 2 hours after opening Trench 5 at the Tiltyard, and already there's something to report. Sophie, have we got anything here yet?
Yeah, we think we've actually found the Tiltyard.
Oh, you're joking, at last.
No, it's There's this lovely soft sand down here, which would have been suitable, I think, for horses to run around on. But more important, we found these bits of plaster.
Why plaster?
Plaster is one of the ingredients that's documented that went into making the Tiltyard. So it's all broken up and disturbed. There are lots of little flecks, and it's the first place we've actually seen it.
Have we got the edge of the Tiltyard?
Yep, even better. We've picked up, this is a very disturbed, probably robbed Tudor wall, but it is the remains of a Tudor wall. So this is the edge of the Tiltyard, the wall on the edge. Here's the surface.
Excellent, just what Julian was hoping for.
Yep.
Kai, we got any finds?
We've got a find, but it's a good one. It ties in very well with this Tiltyard surface. It's a horseshoe.
Can we say anything about it?
Yeah, it's a type of horseshoe that's called a heavy horseshoe. It does date to the Tudor period. We know that Henry VIII was one of the driving forces that brought in heavy horses from France.
How long did those go on for?
They were in use for somewhere between 50 and 100 years, but it's a good Tudor date.
Could it be anything to do with Henry?
I don't think we can say it's Henry VIII's horseshoe, but it's certainly one of his innovations.
At last it feels as though we might actually be able to sort out the Tiltyard. Shaping armour was a long, arduous and noisy process. In fact, for the men that made it, deafness was a serious occupational hazard. When the armoury was working at full capacity, the noise would have been overwhelming. It's strange to think that Henry placed this deafening royal factory so close to his personal apartments. At the Armory, Trench 3, the one nearest the river, is now 7 feet deep, but there's still no trace of any Tudor buildings. With just hours left to go, David hopes Dana might be able to point him in the right direction.
Dana, this has come right out of the middle of this pit we're working in at the moment.
Okay, let's have a go. Wow, look,
That's actually
quite a lot just with one dip to come up. So it means we're closer to where there was a blacksmith working.
right, but not sort of on top of his anvil or underneath
It's
his
not
anvil.
right around his anvil, but it's nearby. Well, I think this is pretty positive evidence, so.
Good evidence
Great.
for metalworking. Great, thank you. I've got more buckets to bring you.
Okay.
Got the curve on it now, isn't it?
Yep, it's actually getting there. It's really important there that I get some final measurements.
It is like a suit fitting, isn't it?
It's more than a suit fitting because, as I said before, you can't flex in this.
But presumably someone like Henry VIII wouldn't have had time to keep coming back to you.
Well, Henry did, because he was really into his armour. That's why they set the workshop up here in the first place. But most people would send a wax or a plaster cast. It actually sort of works on you, doesn't it? More or less. Does that feel comfortable there, sir?
Feels fine, yeah.
Good.
Pockets?
I don't think so, sir. And I shall refrain from saying suits you.
With time running out in our search for Henry's armoury, Mick and Stuart see if there's any more information to be had from Dana's collection of minute iron deposits.
Stuart, this is the pile that I was where I was collecting earlier, and it took me about 3 hours to collect this amount. And this one took me about 20 minutes. So this amount came from the spoil heap, so it's unstratified. We don't really know where it's come from. It could have even been brought in from somewhere else. But this is actually coming from the Trench 3, quite, fairly low down.
At the end of the armoury site.
Yeah.
Right. So this is getting more the deeper it goes down.
Yeah.
Implying that we're getting very near
We're getting
to
closer.
the debris of the floor. So what are we looking at on here then?
As iron is heated up, it sort of the surface layers fall off as they're hammered, and when you watch a blacksmith, you see
clouds of sparks.
You see sparks flying, and what those are little platelets of iron.
What about these almost perfect little balls? Like that one there is perfect, isn't it? Like a little marble.
A story in themselves. You only get these little spheres if you're heating to a very high temperature.
Right.
And you're doing that if you're wanting to weld.
Oh, right.
So it's not just hammering metal, they're actually welding.
Yeah.
So that's again, we're getting more of the story of what was going on in the workshop.
And so it seems that with patience and detailed analysis, it's the smallest of finds that's proved to be our richest source. At the Tiltyard, we'd hoped to find the foundations of the towers in Trench 3, but as yet all we've got is associated Tudor rubble. But thanks to some careful excavations, the Tudor walls found in Trenches 2 and 4 are beginning to form a coherent picture.
Hey, you've made progress.
Well, we're trying to do our best.
Haven't you? Because I saw this little part here earlier on, but you've got all this to play with, and you've got a buttress. Congratulations.
Yeah, we've cleared away all this rubble, and we found this big block here and this brick stuff descending away from the wall. What do you think that could be?
Actually, that's really nice, because on Phil's trench next door, he had what seemed to be a buttress, and then the robbed-out wall next to it. You've got the wall and the buttress together, which shows it's all part of a big external wall, and we're looking for a first-floor banqueting hall.
Yeah.
That was 30 feet wide, must have had a timber roof with quite a thrust on it. So we'd be looking at an external wall, bracing a big building like that. Broad footings. To me, you've got all the ingredients there of a banqueting hall.
But before Jonathan will finally commit and say that we've definitely found Henry VIII's magnificent banqueting hall, he proposes one more test.
Hey, Henry, have you got a second?
Yeah,
please,
sure.
thanks.
Yeah.
I've got a theory, really, that this wall is part of the banqueting hall, 1527. Okay. And Edward Hall, the chronicler, tells us it's 30 foot wide. And we seem to have two walls that add up to 30 foot, but he also says it's 100 foot long.
Okay.
Now, if that's right, the two buttresses we've got, they should be part of a system that adds up to 100 feet. Okay?
Right, okay.
So maybe 5 times 20 foot. But if that's right, then this one, that one, there should be 40 foot between them. Right. If not, then we can forget the whole thing. So it's kind of make or break.
Okay,
but if you could measure,
so if I give a point on each, see what the distance is, and
right in the middle of each, because these things should have braced the roof trusses, and each of the roof trusses is set equally apart.
Right. Let's have a look.
Okay, Henry, so here's the other one.
The second buttress,
yeah.
right.
And if maybe you can get the middle, maybe down, somewhere like that.
Yeah,
down
okay.
There. See what you think.
Right. Just bring that. How about that?
40.212, you beauty! 40 feet. So you got 20-foot units, 5 of them.
Yep.
We've now got a whole 100-foot long, 30-foot wide. It's got to be the banqueting house.
Throughout the afternoon, Master M has been busy transforming my breastplate. Unfortunately, our armoury lacks the necessary horse-drawn polishing mill required to buff and shine the armour, so that process has to be done elsewhere. In Henry's day, it would have taken just over a week to make this piece, but with Master M's skill and a little bit of time team ingenuity, we've done it in just 2 days.
I put cross straps on it, a very common way of holding breastplates on in those days.
That's really snug.
That's the idea.
What's this bit for?
That's to protect the stomach. It's called a fold. It has sliding rivets on the side so that when you get on your horse, it all lifts up, nice and flexible.
"6 o'clock, and the remains of the armoury have proved too deep or too disturbed for us to find. But thanks to Dana's minute hammer scale, we can now say for certain that on this site, not only did armourers hammer sheet iron into suits fit for a king, they also welded it here. And let's not forget Stuart, who's been busy digging out original source material and has managed to pull together a vivid picture of what the armoury may have looked like.
What was the extent of this armoury, Stu? I'm not sure whether we're dealing with a garden shed or something that's, you know, a huge complex.
Well, I think it's a bit bigger than the garden shed.
Right.
I've been looking at the original accounts and inventories and work that's been done here in that period, and we're actually able to build up quite a nice picture of what's going on. There's a cutting room, that's where the plates are actually being slipped and cut to shape. There's a workhouse, which is probably the main work area, all the panel beatings taking place. There's a locksmith's office. There's an armoury stable, there's an armoury store yard, there's a staff house, and there's a horse-drawn polishing mill.
So it's quite an extensive yard with buildings around it, at very least.
It is, and there's also 22 armourers in 1511, plus there'll be apprentices and so on as well. Yeah. But the interesting thing to give us some idea of shape and size of what's going, you've got this horse-drawn polishing mill. Well, that in itself needs 10 metres, just to perform that function. And it's probably in a yard, so you're going to need all these buildings probably in a courtyard arrangement with a yard for the mill in the centre.
Yeah. So it could easily occupy several of those patches of grass that we've got out there, couldn't it?
Without any problem at all.
So I ought to be thinking of a sort of like a small factory with a lot of activity going on in it, in different buildings, in different rooms.
That's a really good way of describing it. It's bang on, yeah.
We may not have found any original suits of armour, but we've managed to get our hands on a copy of one of Henry's that was actually made in Greenwich. At 6'2", Henry was a massive man for his time, and the only person here who comes close to filling it is Phil. The original of the suit was made in 1540, and it's thought it may have been commissioned to imbue Henry with youthful vigour just before his union with Anne of Cleves. But it's unlikely that Anne ever got to see her husband in this suit, as the marriage lasted just 6 months. With the end of the day fast approaching, Jonathan's now confident that finally our 5 trenches have given us enough to work out the layout of the Tiltyard.
This shows us the alignment of all the halls. Disguising house of 1527, gallery, the banqueting house of the same year. Off we go to the Tudor palace by the river, and here are the Tiltyard towers looking down on the action below.
Yeah.
But on this site, we need to be able to fix them, don't we? We would be looking at the end of that range, going down toward the Riverside Palace in the Tudor period.
Yep.
Here in this trench in the foreground here, we've got some service buildings.
So that's off the drawing down here, in fact.
Just down this area.
Yeah.
Now we're looking into the Tiltyard proper, and we'd expect it to be on the right-hand side, stretching back toward that road. And the middle trench is probably about there.
Oh, so that's actually in the Tiltyard?
Well, it's picked up the gravel, the sand and the plaster associated with the Tiltyard surface.
I saw all the pebbles in it.
Yeah, and a bit of horseshoe.
Yes, yes.
So we've even got a bit of horse there too, which is nice. Now on the trenches toward the back, we've picked up on some Tudor wall, which is probably about there.
Right.
Edward Hall, in his chronicle, tells us the banqueting house is 30 foot wide, and the distance between a Tudor wall in that trench and this one here is 30 feet.
Oh,
exactly.
that seems all right, doesn't it?
So that's really pinning it down nicely. And we're really singing when we get toward the back, because where we expect to find the Tudor Tiltyard towers, the geophysics shows a great mass there.
Yeah.
And what we find in that trench is a whole lot of masonry that's associated with Tudor demolition.
That's a lot clearer now. I can see where that fits in.
People usually associate Greenwich with its great maritime history, but after 3 days battling, we've managed to put a crucial piece of Henry VIII's regal history on the map. We can now say that over there was the tilting yard, where Henry himself laid about his opponents, and over there was the banqueting hall, where he feasted after the tournament. We took a bit of a battering over the 3 days and had a bit of a struggle, but in the end, we fought through to a noble and most excellent victory.